Good afternoon, everyone. I was asked today to talk about specifically graduation rate and narrowing the achievement gap as it relates to that. Certainly, there's a lot of things that are happening in Jacksonville to improve the graduation rate, so I'm going to focus on that. And then there are other type of work linked to STEM, student voice, that I can integrate toward the end based on what you may be most interested in. This is our vision and our mission, newly created when I became superintendent about 2.5 years ago. And this was created by directly engaging the community and all stakeholders in Jacksonville regarding where we were as a school district and where we wanted to go. And I think it's extremely relevant because we focus on every student. And so you can't talk about equity and access if you're not talking about all. Not 75%, not 80%, not 90%, not the kids that are already high performing and going on to college. It's every student. And inspired and prepared for success in college or a career and life in general. And so you have to start with the vision, you have to start with the expectations, and then the mission goes into, well, what do you do every day to make that vision happen? And we focus on the concept of excellence in every school, in every classroom, for every student every day. If you just take a minute and stop and think about what that means, is no matter what school you're in, no matter what zip code, no matter what type of child you're trying to engage and inspire and educate, if that happens every day, then the vision becomes a reality where every student can be successful. And I start there, if we go to the next slide. And to go into graduation rate, because for me, we can talk about many statistics, but the most important statistic, I believe, when you talk about K-12 public education, is graduation rate. Is our children that you assume responsibility for, whether at the elementary, middle, or high school level, are they graduating in 4 years? And the conversation has changed in Jacksonville, where it's not just graduating in 4 years, but where are they going after graduation? And that's why we're talking about college readiness, and I'll speak to more about that in a minute. But one thing that I find lacking among many leaders at the superintendent level and even sometimes at the principal level is I think we have embraced the language of equity and access. I think everyone now today has the language. But what I find lacking are the systems and processes to make it a reality. And that takes strategy, that takes thoughtfulness, and it takes courage. You have to be willing to do things differently because our results have been, for the most part, the same over the years. So the work in Jacksonville has started with demanding equity and being uncompromising about that. While demanding equity, it goes back to that vision and a mission, but acknowledging the challenge. When I talk to leaders and I ask them how they're doing and all they're talking about is the positive, then something's wrong. Because we know that still so many children are falling behind and not reaching their academic and civic potential. So anytime you're going into a new environment or leading an organization, a lot of people are fearful of acknowledging the problems. But you can't start with developing solutions and new systems if you're not problem solving and acknowledging the challenge. And I think what we're trying to create in Jacksonville is a culture of problem solving. Identify the problem and build a system to solve the problem or create a solution to the problem. And then own the improvement. When I started as superintendent, it was engaging the community. I had multiple town hall meetings. Every board meeting, I used data to talk about graduation rate, gaps in graduation rate among African American students, white students, Hispanic students. I talked about it regarding literacy, suspension rates, arrest rates, always talking about data. Every one of my presentations in the community is a data-driven conversation to negate some of the deep-seated distrust and tension that is linked to a conversation about equity. The data speaks for itself, so we can get over the historical issues and forget about blaming individuals if we can talk about what do the numbers say. The numbers don't lie, and the numbers have been the same for quite a many years. But part of the ownership isn't blaming parents. It's not blaming the community. It's that we're in charge of children when parents drop those children off or they get on the bus. So there is a parent component to the work, but what are we doing in the educational system when we have those babies to do something differently with them so they can be successful? And so when we talk about graduation rate, it started with, so in many ways, these are the inputs. And I'm going to talk about the outputs, which is the data in the next couple slides. So the inputs are, one, establishing early warning systems. When starting as superintendent, it was shocking to me how many students were not graduating simply because they were missing a couple credits in 4 years. So we were not tracking children and tracking in a positive way, in a data systems way, to know how many credits were children away from graduating. If in the state of Florida, you have to pass the 10th grade basic skills reading test, and then you have to pass the algebra test, usually 8th or 9th grade. So many, and then in Florida, you can use an accordance score with the ACT and the SAT. So to me, there were so many students that weren't passing the state exam, but yet they weren't even taking the ACT and the SAT. So we were very reactive when it came to knowing our students and where they stood with graduation. So we created an early warning indicator system where every 11th grader and 12th grader, we knew exactly what did it take to graduate regarding credits. Did you pass the state exam? Have you taken the ACT or the SAT? And so we at the school level became hyper-focused with making sure that children were not falling through the cracks. We use that language, but we don't develop the systems to monitor it and problem solve to ensure that they're not falling through the cracks. That led to putting graduation coaches in all of our Title I high schools so that someone would own the process of making sure that children were on track to graduate on time. It meant engaging parents. It meant meeting extra with students so that they would understand where they stood. In addition to that, I would meet quarterly with high school principals with their data in front of me to ask them, and I would call out individual students' names and ask them, where is this child as far as graduating on time? What systems are happening? What follow-up is happening to ensure that they can graduate in the 4 years? Acceleration programs available in every school throughout our district. So we ensured that at the minimum, every school had an international baccalaureate program or an ACE Cambridge program. That every school offered advanced placement. That was not the case. That every school offered dual enrollment. And this goes to the next bullet, which is we have to create better pathways for our children. Not every child. So when we think about acceleration and we think about rigor, that doesn't mean that you put every child in an advanced placement class. And so I've seen high schools, I've seen districts believe that the silver bullet is put them in an advanced placement class. Oftentimes that sets children up for failure. Instead, we've relied more on dual enrollment, and I'll show you numbers in a moment, where dual enrollment in early college programs instantly allow a child who's on the fence about thinking about whether they're college material or not to know instantly that they can go to college and be successful because they take that college course on the high school campus or on the college campus, which is transformational for many students who have never even walked on a college campus before. So we have created pathways that by the time students are in their junior year, they're either taking AP class, an IB class, an ACE class, or a dual enrollment class. So every student must be taking one of those classes by 11th grade. So we're moving them toward the college experience. We have also intensified and expanded industry certification because I do believe that we should be thinking college, we should be thinking critical thinking skills, but we also have to think about the world of work. So lots of our children are also being offered industry certification, which makes their high school experience more relevant. Multiple pathways, leverage business partners. We talked earlier, there's a conversation about STEM, where we have now a cybersecurity program at one of our schools, an advanced manufacturing program where our students now, and this is the motto in all of our schools, is to build career academies that are relevant for students at the high school level, in that in 4 years, high school, they'll have a high school diploma, and they'll also receive an associate's degree in either in cybersecurity or advanced manufacturing, and they have internships with the business partner. So not only are they getting high school credit, high school diploma, college credit and getting real-world experience in the workforce. So they're learning the social skills that it takes to be successful in the real world, and that's a model that we're spreading throughout all of our high schools. And then lastly is the focus on human capital. We have to realize that it's not a child problem, it's an adult problem, and it's an adult challenge. And so historically in Jacksonville, we've had 3 feeder patterns, the Ribault, Raines, and Jackson feeder patterns that have historically been the lowest performing feeder patterns. I was able to raise $40 million locally just in Jacksonville in order to offer very unique incentives to allow the most high-performing reading teachers, based on the value-added model, to $20,000 above what they normally make to stay in those low-performing schools for 3 years at the minimum. We also offered $17,000 for high-performing reading and math teachers, same thing for math, to stay in those schools at $20,000 or $17,000 to relocate from more suburban, higher-performing schools into those schools. We also moved out 100 teachers out of those feeder patterns into other schools or discontinued contracts because most of you know school cultures, and we're not honest about this, that there are cancers within our faculties often. And it's only a couple teachers often that can ruin an entire morale of a faculty and kill the dreams of children. So you have to have the right mindset and the right approach in those classrooms as well. Beyond a human capital front was a focus on principal leadership and keeping our high-performing principals in the low-performing schools. Often they're eager to get promoted. They're eager to go to more suburban or higher-performing schools. In addition to that, we incentivize those higher-performing principals to come in and stay. Continuity of faculty and the adults and children's lives are essential, and we have to think in a sustainable way in developing those relationships. Lastly, connected to the 3 feeder patterns in human capital was an investment in technology. So the 3 lowest feeder patterns will all be wireless by the end of this next year, and they all will have one-to-one devices. And so we certainly, that is not a silver bullet, but today's children think through technology and need access to that type of equipment, especially when we talk about the achievement gap. So this is the graduation rate for all of our students. Pink was the baseline. At 67%, almost 68, and now we're at 74%. This is district-wide and 2 years of work linked to some of the strategies and initiatives that I talked about earlier. We are now only 2 percentage points away from the state average, and in Florida, we have 67 districts, very large, very small, and rural, so a great deal of diversity when we talk about Florida. This is what I'm most proud of. So not only are more kids graduating, but more African-American students are graduating. So this is Duval County. We were about 5 out of the big 7 districts in Florida. That's Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Orlando, Pinellas, and then us. Now we are second among the big 7 with African-American graduation rate. And only second to Miami-Dade, where I came from, after we won the Broad Prize for Excellence in Urban Education. So you could see, so it's all about systems is my point, is that this data doesn't move on accident. It happens with intentionality and systems and processes to make it happen. So I talked earlier about college readiness. Our goal is not just to graduate children. They have to be college ready. So college readiness rates in Florida and nationally, most of you know, are defined through the ACT and the SAT or the college placement test. And so when we started, we've seen, as you can see, an increase in college readiness in reading, an increase in college readiness in math. And the importance of this is that children do not have to take a remediation class when they go on to college. There's nothing worse than being excited about going into college and then you're in a remediation class. Then many students, especially those, and this is happening to minority and students that are from lower socioeconomic background, they feel like they're back in high school and they're not getting into the areas of interest. This is what gets me excited every day, and knowing that we're doing something differently. So not only are more kids college ready across our district, but if you look at African American college readiness rates, you can see the increase in that area. I would directly point to an ACT and SAT class that we have for all 11th graders. One thing that I struggled with coming from an immigrant and working class background was that I saw parents that naturally had their children take ACT and SAT classes as early as 8th grade and 9th grade. For those students that are growing up in the working class or lower socioeconomic class or don't know how to navigate the system, they will never take an ACT and the SAT prep course. They'll never necessarily even know about the ACT and the SAT unless the school and the district is intentional about that type of exposure. The other thing that's linked to this is the college-going culture that has been developed in our high schools. If you go to our high schools, our principals now give wristbands for those students, one color for college ready in math and one color for college ready in reading. And the students now own that they're college ready. So they'll say to each other, I'm college ready in reading, I'm not college ready in math. And that has created a level of ownership about their own development and where they are, and that naturally creates that college-going culture. So this is accelerated coursework. This is defined by IB, ACE, dual enrollment, advanced placement, or industry certification. You can see district-wide more kids taking the classes and dual enrollment, which I think is extremely exciting. Almost 3,000 more students taking dual enrollment courses in Duval County Public Schools, and that is directly college, creating that college-going culture. This is our work with industry certification. You can see more students are taking industry certification and more are passing. That means that they're more employable when they leave the high school. Even those that are going to college can then compete and get jobs that they can take higher paid while they're in college as well. Talked about graduation rate. The district now, when you look at the achievement gap between African American students and whites, we are now #1 among the Big Seven in math from 3rd grade to 8th grade. And when you look at reading, we are tied with Broward among the Big Seven between white and African American students, and then now we are second in African American graduation rate, a slide I showed you earlier. The only thing that I would add that's not directly linked to the graduation rate, and I have 1 minute and 30 seconds, is all the other things that are going that support this work at the high school level. And I just want to touch on a couple of those things. We rebuilt art and music programs throughout our district. Every one of our elementary schools now have a full-time art teacher and a full-time music teacher. Every one of our middle schools now has two art programs, 2 music programs, or one of the other, and our high schools already had that. We rebuilt the code of conduct. It goes back to a point that was made earlier. We were so excessive with outdoor suspensions. We built an in-school suspension program at each of our middle schools and high schools where we cannot suspend students before their parents are met with, detentions, in-school suspensions. We even created out-of-school suspension centers so that when you're removing students from the school environment, they have to go to a different location other than home. Because we all know what happens when students are directly sent home. In addition to that, so much to mention. I will say, very excited about a 38% increase in our gifted for African American students in only 1 year. We've increased the number of African Americans that are identified for gifted, and no one talks about this statistic, a 23% decrease in EBD. And if you know what EBD stands for, emotionally behaviorally disturbed, which is one of the most disturbing titles and labels I've heard, which I would like to fix. But we're seeing fewer students referred to that and more in gifted, and I think that also speaks to the cultural change. But I will just stop by saying it's intentional. Systems and processes, which then has a direct positive influence on children. I know, one last thing, Parent Academy. And I want to leave with parents because districts often are very frustrated about what happens with parents. And 1 year we developed a Parent Academy program that offers classes on how to advocate for your child educationally. So what questions to ask during parent-teacher conferences, how do you review a report card, what are the graduation requirements, how to fill out the FAFSA form. We also offer classes on discipline, how to discipline your child, how to pick their friends, how to monitor what they're doing with technology. And then the last part of the Parent Academy is how do you become a better, how do you become whole, how do you become a whole parent? So we offer class on financial literacy, on resume building, on going through an interview. In 1 year alone, 3,000 parents have gone through our Parent Academy, and that's only 1 year, and that will expand as we move forward. So I will stop and open up to your questions. Thank you.